Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hey, everybody, actually episode 77. We are talking tonight about centering class assessments in school improvement processes. And I have as my guest, David Woodard. David, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I am ready to have you on. We had a really great conversation recently about just what it is that we do and what it is that we know about assessments and teams. And I can't wait to hear what you have to bring to this conversation. So let's start the evening by having you share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and this that you do in the education world.
Great. Well, so Dave Woodward is my name, and I'm here in Colorado, which is where I grew up. Went to school in Denver Public Schools. Proud alumni of Manual High School. Go Bolts! And we are, I've been in education kind of like my whole life. My mother was in education. My father was a school board member. I've been really immersed in education my entire life. Back in the early 90s, I started teaching, started out in preschools, actually. I was really interested in early childhood development, coming straight out of college, and started working with preschoolers, and then eventually worked my way into elementary school, where I was a classroom teacher for many years, and then followed that up with becoming an instructional coach and an elementary math specialist was my kind of leadership role here in Boulder, Colorado, for a long time, all the way up until 2020 when I finally separated. But it was during that time also that I started Forefront Education, which is the company that I run right now. And we started this program back in 2009. So I was still very much involved in my work as an instructional coach, and felt so many pains as an instructional leader that I really wanted to address, and thought, there's no better way to do this than build it myself. And so got a couple of high quality computer software engineers behind me, and started it, and we've been going ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exciting. So I really would love for you to share with our audience your journey as you worked toward build this company that you have, the sparking interest, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so one of the kind of seminal moments that I remember was when I first kind of came into a position as a coach, and this was back in the mid 2006 was the year, and state assessments were rolling out. Everybody was very much, the No Child Left Behind Act was in full swing, and everyone was very optimistic about the potential for data to transform our work as educators and to really help us to understand our achievement gaps, to understand how we can refine our work. So we all came together. There was a very large group of us. Boulder's a pretty decent sized district. And we all came together into a big room and sat around for about 3 days and spent probably 2 days of that looking at spreadsheets of data. and we would highlight this and we would highlight that and we'd circle this. And in the end, it was all kind of guesswork. That was really, it was frustrating because, we were like, okay, so at the end, we need to set some kind of a SMART goal, right? We have to set a goal for this thing. And we're like, okay, so last year you were at 53, so let's shoot for 56 this year. And I'm like, well, but that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't, this is not meaningful. We're just rolling dice. We're saying, why not go for 57, 56, 57, 58? Who cares? Right. And so we just, there was no real tangible, understandable kind of thing. We all had hypotheses about what might be going on, but that wasn't really in the data. It was just us and our experience with the kids. Right? And having talked to these students and having worked with these students, we could say, hey, we got students who are emerging in their bilingualism and they need to learn English, and how are we going to do that and engage in classroom, et cetera. But that wasn't coming from the data. It was all just guesswork after we had studied and looked at and highlighted everything. And so that was really a really strong moment for me to say, this is not good enough. We've got to do better. And so that was kind of a good starting point for us.
Yeah. So our episode is all about really centering classroom assessments on school improvement processes. So I really want to ask you about conversation recently. We were talking about timely, detailed, and aligned assessments. Tell us a little bit more about that. If we're going to have what you mean by timely, detailed, and aligned, what does that mean?
Yeah. So let's start with this idea of timely. That basically means that we're getting the information back quickly. There's really nothing more immediate, of course, than watching your students in the classroom. But it's hard. That's kind of hard data to kind of use systemically, right? As we try to do school improvement. So the timely data that we're talking about a lot, at Forefront Education, is this ability to look at classroom assessment data that's coming in on a regular basis. What I love about classroom assessment data is that it is, you've got your quizzes that happen on Tuesday. You're able to score it that night and have it ready to go for Wednesday for your planning. Or it could be an end of unit assessment, something that's really very immediate, very relevant to what's going on in your classroom. This importance of timeliness, right, is that we can respond to it quickly in terms of the misunderstandings we might be able to identify in our students, but it also means that it's relevant while we're looking at it, and so that we can use it in our planning even the next day or the next week, right? And when we're talking about detailed, what I mean by that is that this is not just broad scope data. This is like question number 3. This is maybe when you're looking through their work and you're identifying that they're having troubles with capitalization of proper nouns. Something that's really very, very specific in its information, so that we can come back and say, okay, we have something very identifiable, something that we can really act on, right? Very actionable. Take it to another story before I let this go away. I remember walking into an intervention team meeting years ago, and I said, okay, so what are we going to work on? And this teacher kind of looked at me kind of baffled, and she said, math. And I said, what we've got to do better than that. We've got to say, it can't even be just place value. We need to talk about what exactly is going on. Why are we identifying these groups? How are we going to target our instruction? And so then the other issue is aligned, right? And this is a huge issue, I think, is that oftentimes the assessments that we're using for our data-driven instruction and our data-driven efforts are not truly aligned with what we're teaching. This is another reason why I feel like classroom assessments are so important, because we know that the assessments that are going to be done during the unit of study that we're in are aligned with the topics of the unit of study, right? There's nothing more frustrating to me and to teachers, right? When you walk into that meeting somewhere in October or November to look at interim assessments that are a broad scope assessment of math. And maybe they'll break it down into geometry or something like this, but still, even then, it's not detailed and it's not really aligned with what we're teaching. Teachers get so frustrated. They say, well, look, I've got this assessment data that shows that my students aren't doing well with geometry. Well, lo and behold, geometry doesn't happen until Unit 4 or something like this. They haven't been working on geometry. Why on earth are we assessing that when we're not doing it? So this idea of making sure that the assessments that we are given and the assessments that we are working with and discussing and spending our time with to try to improve our schools and improve our instruction must be aligned with the instruction and the topics of instruction that we're working on.
Yeah. And I want to pause and just insert that this is, so I'm not necessarily against having curriculum put in the hands of teachers. However, if you're implementing a big box curriculum that you are teaching day by day with fidelity, and I use that term loosely, then there's really not, like, we have to make time and opportunity to at the classroom assessments that we are doing, or at least that we're trying to implement, and how are we going to adjust and modify those based on either what we have taught, the needs of this, and then how are we shifting and changing our instructional practices even while implementing the curriculum. And that doesn't happen enough. We feel those like summits, end of unit, or it could be like your state assessment. We wait for the periods to reflect and try to fix what has already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that we need to modify these assessments sometimes, that we need to make sure that they're meaningful for ourselves. I mean, let's face it, some of the big box assessments or big box programs that are out there provide us with assessments that really don't give us the meaningful data that we need. I feel honestly, I'm kind of a PLC fan myself in the public, professional learning communities. And, they really emphasize that teachers should be involved in the assessment creation process. Now, I think it's important to have teachers involved in the assessment decision-making process at the very least. But I think oftentimes we have to modify the assessments to make sure that we're getting the information that relates to our school improvement efforts, our goals, our ambitions for our students.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, that's a real challenge, that we face, I think, as leaders, right? When we look at the assessments that have been provided to us and that they're not of the quality that we know is necessary for us to get rich, meaningful information about our students.
Mm-hmm. And I often hear teachers those very assessments too. Like we complete the assessment in the classroom, but then when the results show exactly what it is that we're learning, then it becomes this venting session of, this was this was a crap assessment that it's the questioning, or we didn't even really focus on that content, etc. So you talked a little bit about challenge, like this is all challenges that we face. Are there other challenges that are common when schools or educators are analyzing data?
Yeah. So I like I say, I think that first challenge that we have is making sure that the assessments that we are putting in front of our teams for this kind of work are really truly aligned with what we believe we in about education and about our students, right? So so there's a little bit of issue there that's sometimes become a challenge when your district has adopted assessments that are all multiple choice for reading or something like this. I don't understand why publishers would make assessments like that, but they do. Right. And so then it becomes this kind of challenge that we have to face in terms of thinking about, okay, is this giving us the information that we need, and how do we write some new questions or modify these questions to meet our needs? I would say that that's definitely a challenge. Another challenge that needs to be faced in this process is making sure that you've got a good scoring guide or collective understandings of what proficiency should look like. That can take some time to discuss, right? And if your program or whatever assessments you're choosing don't have a high quality scoring guide, you might have to either look for one that's coming from another district that might be using the same assessments, or you might have to develop that yourself. I think one of the things that I found was a challenge, once again, going back to my own work with this, I walked in one time to a meeting and we were trying to do this. We wanted to use our assessment data to understand our students. And I'm like, look, let's bring something with us, bring some assessments with you, and bring your grade book so we can see how this is being done. And what I discovered, and I probably should have been aware of this and probably been ready for it, but I wasn't, was that no one was consistent. One teacher had a paper grade book, another one was doing it in spreadsheets, a third one just had, she really believed portfolios, and so she had just this like big box of folders that she brought into the meeting. And there was no way for us to have a conversation about how our students were doing, because we had no framework for discussing them. There was different scoring methodologies. There was different ideas of what proficiency looked like. So I think it's important that hopefully you're adopting a program or you're adopting assessments that help you to do this work and really support you in that. But if not, you kind of have to back up and make sure that you've got common understandings of what proficiency looks like. Yeah. And then I would say that the next challenge, that's a major challenge for most schools and districts, is the organization of that then. Are you going to then organize that in a spreadsheet, or will you use a software like Forefront? Because that's basically why we designed this program, was to be able to get to this organization of our classroom assessment information and or something. You have to have some way to be able to quickly access and visualize the assessment information so that it can be discussed, right? Now, I don't want to say that only look at data. In fact, I think that the data visualizations are just a starting point for you to recognize, okay, we've got a pain point here, or we've got celebrations over here, whatever it is that's your starting point. I think having those student assessment papers on the table are really a great step. And in fact, I've been in conversations where you kind of get stalled and you're sort of like, well, they're having a lot of trouble with this. And then everybody kind of gets frustrated and things like that. And I've found that over and over again, as soon as you could put those student work samples onto the table, suddenly the conversation reboots. And then we're talking about kids. We're talking about real misunderstandings and understandings and how we can support them. So I would say that those are challenges, though, with making sure that you've got common understandings and then systems of organization.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Oh, good. This is such good information. So powerful. And if you are here with us tonight live, I want you to put in the comments what has resonated with you so far. If you are noticing some of those same challenges at your school or on your campus, please put it in the comments because we want to know. Man, that you said that I would love to unpack, but one of the things that you shared was a challenge, is something I really feel like hinders a whole from moving forward. And it's well, two things that stand out to me. And the first one is just this idea of people coming in with a variety of different ways that they out approaching the work. Now, in education, I do believe, you probably believe also, that there is room for autonomy, and we want autonomy, but there's also freedom within structure, right? And if we don't have structures and organization, then we're actually creating this kind of internal chaos. It's almost like a quiet chaos, it's not super visible, but it's chaos for everyone in the organization, overwhelm. So I love this idea of really ensuring have a common language so we have some common in place. And then the other thing too, what you've said, I experience this often during like team plannings when we're talking about where is it that the students are struggling. We name like a big broad idea. Place value is one of those struggle with place value, or they struggle. I'm trying to think of something that's pretty common, like multiple what is the word for that? Multiple word problems,
multi-step
Thank you.
word problems. Oh yeah, always.
The word was leaving. I could not come up with it. Multi-step word problems. Yes, it's always an issue. When we start talking about, well, why is that? What's the barrier for students? Because we don't have any in front of us, we're just kind of the same kinds of ideas forever and always. For example, like students like maturity, it's not developmentally appropriate, or don't know their facts. It's just the same. I don't want to say it's the same excuses again and again, but it's the same. It's the same phrases. It's the same go-to things that are barriers. But if we were to put work out in front of us and really look at what students are doing, man, how the conversation would change.
Yeah, I really, that's what I've noticed in the work as well, is that there's nothing more motivating, honestly, than looking at that student work sample and then digesting, what is it, dissecting the reasoning behind the answers and things like this. Yeah, it's really, it's really challenging, and just that idea of quickly trying to make sure that we as leaders get past. Okay, what I like to say is, because I hear the griping sometimes, I hear the kind of complaint, if you will. And what I like to say is, once we've done that for a couple minutes, I'll stop it and I'll say, I think that's an important part of defining the problem. And I think that we've defined the problem now. And now let's think about what are the solutions. And the other thing in terms of that, just to get, not to take us too far off of base, but when you talk about, it's not developmentally appropriate, I've heard that many times too. And I say, look, we don't have control over biology, of course, but development is a function of the experiences that a person has and the time that they engage with that idea. We do have some control over time, and we have a lot of control over the experiences we provide for our students. So let's think about providing experiences for children that are going to help them to develop. Even though they might not catch up 100% of the way that we want them to, we need to think about providing them with those quality experiences. And now let's design those. And so trying to quickly say, okay, we framed the problem, we understand the problem, let's be solution-minded.
Man, David, you're giving me so many things. We're at the end of the school year now.
I know.
So next year, when I get ready to work with teams again, this is going to be some of my go-to language. For this episode, I'm going to rewatch this and jot down some of these things. So thank you for this coaching session.
I've been at it for a little longer.
Okay, so you mentioned leaders. Let's talk the different roles in education and what, like, I know there's the role educator. I feel like we've kind of talked about that, but if we're looking at all of the different types of roles in education, what do you feel like each role, or what role does each role have in like leveraging assessment data?
And that's a really good question, and I think it does become very different for different people in different roles. I'll start briefly at the kind of the upper levels of things, right? When you might be a multi-school leader, right? I understand that the data that you might want to look at is somewhat circumspect, something that's going to be broader, the 40,000 foot view, right? And I recognize that that's important. We need to have ways to summarize the data for us to understand these things, because we can't, as multi-school leaders, get too deep into the weeds, right? But I do think it's important that sometimes you do take a good look at some pieces of detailed information to make sure that you're kind of emphasizing things and then also guiding that messaging to the school level leaders, right? When it comes down to the school level, right, there's the principals, and honestly, I find sometimes that I'm not quite sure exactly what principals need. I think that they kind of want to guide the work, and they want to make sure that people have access to the information that they need, but they don't really want to get stuck in the weeds either, right? But then when it comes down to those instructional coaches, the interventionists and specialists at that level, and then also the classroom teachers. This is when it comes back to that idea of that information that's going to be actionable and meaningful at the classroom level. Now, I'm going to back up just a minute, because I think that what happens oftentimes, and this is, pardon me if I go on my soapbox here just a little bit, but I think oftentimes what happens is that the district level leadership that needs that broad scope data to do their work will mandate assessment systems with best intentions in mind that will give them that broad scale 40,000 foot view. But then not recognizing that really, once that hits the road and gets down to the classroom level, is not detailed, aligned, focused, or timely. Right? And oftentimes not transparent, right? And when we're looking at, and I just call them interim assessments, and I'm going to call them out. There's iReady, there's STAR, and there's MAPS. They're the big three. Those assessment systems are usually not transparent. That is, you don't know what the students are doing. They don't know what they're getting there right and what they're getting wrong. And so when these district level leaderships are making good decisions for their own work, I think that they need to think about the work of the educators and how they really need to focus on something different than that. So what I'm advocating for is that at the school level, we make sure first and foremost that we have good quality assessment data that's going to inform the work of the educators that are doing it on a daily basis. Your teachers in the classroom need meaningful, actionable information, like we've been talking about this whole time. And so what I think we need to then figure out then is how do we take that same information and summarize it in ways that are meaningful for leadership, so that we don't have to have too many redundant and expensive and time-consuming assessments that are out there. So I think when you're really thinking about educators, and I think about the interventionists, and I think about the instructional coaches and the teachers, I think that we've really got to make decisions about the assessments that are going to be helpful for them. And let me just loop on this just a little bit. That is to say, classroom teachers need a lot of assessments. We need assessments for our grading, right? We need assessments for our formative assessment purposes, of course. We need assessments for parent communication. We need assessments for feedback to the students, right? So, and all of those are going to be those classroom assessments that we have. So that's why I feel like we need to take those assessments and put them at the center of the system, right? So that then we can utilize them for all those very important things that teachers need them for, and then hopefully reutilize them for your principals and reutilize those same assessments for the district level leadership.
Yeah. So good. In fact, John said, I have the chills listening to David. So
Thank you, Jonna.
Yes. And I 100% agree. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost imagining as you're talking, we're looking at more of a bottom up approach instead of a top down approach.
Right.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I think.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just another thing that's part of kind of a broken system that we have, and it's hard to move forward and move past that, but so for really going to make gains.
Yeah, I just think if we constantly as leaders kind of think, okay, who is it that needs to do the work better? Really,
yeah,
it's the classroom assessments. It's classroom teachers, right?
Right.
So we have to center them in our decision making. That's what I believe.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot in this episode of like aligning assessments to the overall vision and goals. Tell a little bit more about the importance of, like, how does that factor into improvement as it ties into classroom assessments?
So when I think about aligning your assessments to your goals, the first thing I think of is make sure that you have devoted time to do so. Put it on the calendar right now. When are you going to talk about this as a leadership team?
Mm-hmm.
let's make sure that we're doing an inventory of all the assessments. That's the thing, is I find also in medium-sized to large-sized districts especially, they might have 15, 20 different assessment systems.
Yep.
They have no idea what's out there.
Yep.
And so I think first and foremost is you have to take the time. I'm going to just throw out another story, and this is one of these things that kills me, right? Having watched this over and over again, I've seen districts go through, these big box implementations, right? And they go through and they're looking at all the unit lessons and everything else, and sometimes they don't pay attention to the assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of drives me nuts. How are you going to assess the efficacy of the program that you are implementing if you don't pay attention to the assessments? Mm-hmm. And assessments are super powerful in terms of a number of things, right? First of all, they're all the work that we're talking about, guiding your instructional decision making, everything. But assessments also communicate to students what we care about. And if they get to the end of the unit and we've been like, yeah, we really want you to like this book, and we really want you to understand this book and all this other thing, and then you give them a multiple choice assessment at the end of the unit that you're going to give them a grade on, and then you're going to send that home to the parents. Think of all the communicating that you've just done about what you truly value, right? Yep. So I think that first and foremost, if you really value certain kinds of learning, then make sure that you are choosing assessments and that you are designing assessments that align with those values. And just to put time on the calendar, make sure that you're having the discussion, because if you push it back, it won't happen.
That's right. Yep. And it can be really easy to get back into the swing and groove of things and miss all of the pieces because you're bogged down with that to-do. Yeah. So good. Okay. So if we're thinking about advice you might have for want to prioritize their approach to classroom assessments, what advice would you give? Where do you think they should start? You've already mentioned meeting with the instructional leadership team, like that. Yes. Priority. What else?
So I was thinking about this question because I obviously just think about all this stuff a little bit too much, but I've really been fascinated over the last year with this idea of improvement science. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this term, but there's been a number of books that have come out talking about improvement science. And if we're really talking about improving our schools, then I think that we need to really be, really focused in those efforts. And what improvement science will talk about is that, first of all, you have to identify a problem. And you can't just say, we've got an achievement gap. That's too broad. You need to get down and very, very focused in it. And so hopefully you'll get down to the point where you could say, something like, we really need to improve our phonics instruction in K2, or that we really need to focus in on number sense and make sure that our students have the basic foundations of numeracy in order to build their competence. Something that's very specific and actionable. Once you're really down there to something specific, then you think about, okay, so what are we going to do to change it, and how are we going to, so is a new phonics program that you're going to implement, or we're going to just make sure that everyone devotes 10 minutes a day to phonics instruction? What is it then? And then clearly, then the next step is to say, okay, if we want this to improve, now we need to make sure that people are doing it. And secondly, we need to assess to ensure that that's happening, right? And so this is why classroom assessments comes back to this once again, because it's this idea that if you want students doing better in the classrooms and the lessons that we are teaching, then we need to assess those. If you want to make sure that your phonics instruction is really high quality and doing great, then you need to listen to students pronouncing those phonemes and reading those letters and making sure that we're getting that detailed information back that's going to guide the instruction and ensure that we're on track. So that's I think kind of just taking us back to this idea of detailed and timely evidence of what we're trying to improve in our schools. And now one thing that I wanted to mention earlier, I'm going to kind of put this out there because I think that it's really, really important. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you, and this is true, check this out, Casey. If you go through and you ask people, why do we assess? and you ask teachers and they'll be like, well, because they make us or whatever, but if you push them on the why, you say, so why do they make us, and why this? And you kind of go through that 7 whys. I don't know if you've ever gone through that activity where you just kept asking why and why over again. Eventually, everybody comes to the fact that we want students to learn more. We want better outcomes for our students. We want to improve our schools. It's why we assess. Now, if that's true, right, that all assessment really foundationally, the reason why we do this is to make sure that we're getting better outcomes for all of our students. Then the question is, why does assessment work for that? And for me, the answer is because assessment helps us to learn as educators how to do our jobs better. We learn about the curriculum that we're teaching and the methodologies of that. We learn about the content that we're teaching and how to understand that content. And we learn about writing better, and we learn about reading better, and we learn about the sciences. We have to learn that content. But I think also foundational to this whole idea is that we learn about the students that are in our classrooms, right? And so educators and assessments, we need to make sure that we are bringing assessments to the center of our systems that help educators, classroom teachers, interventionists, coaches especially, to learn about students in the way that they understand and build their knowledge.
Yes. So I am walking with nuggets of gold. And I would be remiss if we did not end this episode with you sharing about the platform that you have and how it can benefit the people who are wanting to move in this direction.
Yeah, so Forefront. So we started this project about 15 years ago, right? And so we've been going for quite a while. And thank you for putting the link there. That's very nice. I like that, the way that moves across. That's kind of cool. Yeah. So this is a nice video demo that we have available so that you can get a really good idea of the platform. But what we're trying to do is to say, okay, let's provide teachers with a platform for them to collect the data that we have agreed on. We want to put central in our work, right? And so you talked a little bit about, kind of giving autonomy to teachers. My experience with teachers, honestly, is if you provide for them high quality tools, they are nothing but appreciative. So this doesn't necessarily feel like some kind of a mandate coming down. It feels like, oh my God, you just took a huge piece of chaos out of my life so that I can focus my efforts on the other things that are important. So we allow district leadership through this to kind of say, okay, we want to collect assessment data here and we want to collect assessment data there. And then we put that all together into a single place so that we can understand and each student holistically. Now, the other thing that's really, really important in the platform that I feel like was a massive problem when I was coming up is that the data stays with the child as they grow. So that if we're collecting data from kindergarten, that it stays with that child into first grade and that we can go back there. Our first grade teachers don't start from zero. Our second grade teachers don't start from zero. They can go back. They can do root cause analysis if they need to and kind of look at some of the unfinished learning from years prior if they need to. And then we also give them the tools to kind of look forward through the program as well to think about, okay, what's coming up? And how have my students done on this topic up to now? And what can I do to prepare them before we get to Unit 6, where we're going to dive back into that and it's going to get a little bit harder. Two-step word problem, great idea. Usually those come up as one-step word problems back in September, right? And then by the time you get to March, they're two-step word problems. Well, we want to know when we're coming up in February, which students are struggling still with one-step word problems before we throw them into the deep end, right? So that we can forward, as I said, and really support them in their learning. So Forefront is an attempt to create an organized system for us to look at the most detailed, timely, and aligned data that we have in our programs and make sure that we're with it on that. Now, once again, the leaders are part of that. And they need to be, right? And so we provide tools then for leaders to be able to get that 40,000-foot view to see how's the curriculum implementation going. That's another thing that drives me nuts, right? Let's just say our district just bought some kind of big box program and we spent, $1 million on this. No one knows if anyone's using it except for the teachers, they know, but what we allow people to do is kind of get a window into that to see how are these assessments going? Is the implementation going well, and things like that. So providing really meaningful tools for the teachers at the classroom level to guide lessons that are focused and aligned with what they're teaching, and then also tools for the leaders to be able to step back and say, okay, we're growing, we're doing well in the program. This is what we want, right? So all of that's kind of built in there, and a lot of ambitions and a lot of love, and it's beautiful software. I must admit, I really am very proud of what we built. So
yeah, and you've shown me some of it, and I'm blown away. Like even
awesome.
Unite is just, it's so something that all educators need their hands on. I cannot count the number of times where we've had conversations about knowing where students were this year's. That's a huge benefit to what you are providing.
Yeah, I think so too. It's fun work in terms of thinking about, how do these programs, are they designed, and how are they aligned with things? The literacy programs are very, very interesting. There's a lot of movement going on with different kind of ideas about how to best assess and teach students to read. And that's it's really fun work thinking about how do we do this all better.
Yeah. How do we do it? I love that. Okay, guys, if you are listening to this and you don't see the website at the bottom, it's forefront.education. That's the main website. So super easy to get to, forefront.education. But if you want to get to this video to see what demonstration looks like, it's for education/video-demo/again. So you're going to see that in the show notes. So don't worry if you catch it. It's going to be in the show notes, so you can click right on it. Okay, David, this has been a fantastic conversation. Do you have just one thing that you want to leave our audience with tonight?
No, that's a good question. I mean, that is a lot of stuff, right? But I think, just focus on the learning. I think that's the real thing, right? I really am feeling so passionate nowadays that we have to understand that we are only going to improve our classroom instruction when our teachers are allowed to learn, and it's through that learning that we will improve.
Yep, I love it. And the classroom assessments is where we learn about our students. Okay. Thank you,
Casey. All
Bye.
right.
Bye. See you next.
Wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks for showing up.
Hey there. Thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with Casey on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.